Hello, and welcome to this month's Urban and Community IPM webinar. I'm Carrie Winbill Rojas, the Associate Director for the Urban and Community Program within UCIPM. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar will focus on pest myths, and we are happy to have Lauren Fordyce as our speaker. Lauren is the Urban IPM educator with the UCIPM program. She provides training and outreach to various urban audiences throughout California on pest management and pesticide safety. Thank you for joining us today, Lauren. You may now go ahead and share your slides and begin.
Thank you, Carrie, for that introduction. Get my slides going. All right, so hello, everyone. Today we will be talking about some common pest myths and debunking them and learning some surprising facts about pests. So I'd like to start by addressing the fact that there are many pest myths out there, and unfortunately, I cannot cover all of them during this presentation. And throughout this presentation, I want to note that I will be avoiding saying the myth directly, and this is because research has shown us that repeating the myth or wrong answer over and over only reinforces that in our minds, so it makes it harder for you to actually remember the truth. So instead, I'm going to share facts or truthful statements related to each myth. Lastly, some of these facts may surprise you. They may conflict with what you have already heard or thought to be true. And I want to recognize that this can be upsetting or frustrating, but my goal throughout this presentation is to keep it fun while debunking some of these myths. So please keep any comments or questions respectful. I will be sharing resources, sources associated with each of the facts or myths that we debunk throughout the presentation on the following slide. So I will briefly stop so that you can look at those, but they will also be available to you after the presentation if you're interested in looking at those and learning more about these. Let's take a look at how pest myths start and can spread. So note that the examples that I use on this slide are purely fictional, and I made all of them up. So personal anecdotes or coincidences are a big way that some of these myths can start and spread. These are based on a personal experience, and it can often convince us that something is true based on just this one singular experience. So an example of this might be if I put banana peels in my houseplants and then I do not see fungus gnats for an entire year, I might think to myself, oh wow, it's the banana peels, obviously, that are causing all of the fungus gnats to not come and live in my houseplants. I might then go take that information and share it around to my friends, post it on social media, that I have discovered this miracle solution. And unfortunately, that was likely just a coincidence. It's possible that I didn't even have a fungus gnat problem to begin with, or perhaps I adjusted my watering practices so that the fungus gnats weren't such a problem this past year. So that is a very common way that we might come across myths and that they might get going. So for something to be proven true in science, we have to often replicate that outcome over and over again. So I would need to show in many situations, time after time again, that the banana peels did in fact prevent fungus gnats from coming and infesting houseplants for me to actually claim that to be true. So just relying on one data point or personal experience for truth is not reliable. Another way that myths can originate is by cherry picking information, or if there is little information or research out there to either prove or disprove a given statement, we can also end up kind of exaggerating research findings or taking, again, one experience as truth when we need more research to really give us the full story. So an example of that might be if researchers were looking at squirrels and their diet preferences, and if they confined the squirrels and gave them no other option but snails, and if the squirrels ate those snails in those very confined unnatural situations, researchers might conclude that squirrels can occasionally eat snails. And if we took that information and started sharing it out with everyone, telling them to promote squirrels in the garden to get rid of snails, we can see where that's a bit of a jump, that's a bit of a leap, and that's not completely accurate. So again, various ways that these myths can originate. They can also be passed down through generations, so there are lots of personal anecdotes or myths that you've probably heard that your grandmother or your mother passed down through generations or other family members. And because they're coming from people that we often love and trust, it's easy to believe them and to think that they are true. So we should fact check our relatives for pest advice the same way that we would any random stranger on the internet telling us some miracle solution. So I want to start by talking about some of the unfortunate truths. So these are going to be things that we might wish were true, were not true, but they are not. So while possums are cute, they are not as innocent or helpful as you may have originally thought. So this poster to the right is full of some possum propaganda. This is commonly found online, and many of these statements are simply not true. So opossums do not eat ticks, or at least they eat way less than we previously thought. They are omnivores, so they feed on a variety of plant material in addition to insects and snakes and frogs and even small mammals like moles and rats and mice. So ticks can be a part of their diet, but it is not a very large portion of their diet. Where we get this idea that ticks may consume more ticks, or opossums may consume more ticks than they do, is from a 2009 research study that prompted the idea that they could eat thousands of ticks in a day. New research from 2021 has identified several flaws with that original research, and they found that possums might not even consume ticks, let alone, 5,000 of them. So the researchers from the newer study analyzed the gut contents of possums and did not find any evidence of ticks in their gut contents. So while they can occasionally eat those ticks, the evidence is not clear as to whether or not they are a large portion of their diet or if they are part of their diet at all. So possums, one of the other myths on this poster is the ability for them to carry and transmit certain diseases. So they fortunately cannot give you rabies. They do not carry rabies, but they are carriers for multiple other important public health diseases. So we should definitely be careful being around them and try to avoid coming in contact with them. Opossums can also become infested with fleas and ticks and mites and lice, so they can be a health risk for our pets, such as cats and dogs. They can also spread typhus to humans, and they can get into fights with dogs and other pet animals that we might have outside. And lastly, as I mentioned, possums are omnivores, so they can also be a pest in the garden, eating our fruits and nuts or vegetables, and just in general being a nuisance in our landscape. So they are not as harmless as we may have originally thought, unfortunately. Here are some of the sources on possums. The next unfortunate truth we have is that houseflies vomit on our food. So it is true. When they feed, they use their sponging mouthparts to fill up their crop, which is a place that they store food before digestion. And when the fly lands on a new piece of food and they want to eat some of that, it regurgitates food that is liquid from its crop onto the new food surface, and that includes any kinds of pathogens in addition to digestive enzymes onto the surface of that new food. So flies land in all sorts of filthy things, including garbage, rotten animals. In this photo here, it is laying on some manure. And any pathogens that are in those nasty places that they land can also then end up on new places where they might land, such as your food. So houseflies are strongly suspected of transmitting at least 65 diseases to human. So they can be more than just a nuisance, they can actually be a risk to our health. So we want to try to keep them away and off of our food as much as possible. Here are the sources for flies. Next up is plague. So this is an ancient disease. It has caused devastating epidemics and illness throughout human history. And unfortunately, it is not just a thing of the past. So today, plague is rare among humans, but it is consistently found among wild rodents, such as chipmunks and squirrels in California and the southeastern parts of the United States, southwestern parts of the United States. So rats and mice in urban areas, fortunately, are not known to be involved in plague transmission, but in the foothill and mountainous regions of California, you are likely to see signs warning you of plague in that area because the chipmunks and squirrels in those areas are continuously infected with the plague. So plague is transmitted to fleas and is transmitted by fleas to these wild rodents, and it often kills the rodents. And if those infected fleas then come in contact with humans or our pets, or if we come in contact with animals that died from the plague, we are at risk of also contracting plague. So pet cats are highly susceptible to plague, and they can spread the plague bacteria to their to their human owners when they cough or sneeze. So we should definitely take measures to avoid contacting those wild rodents, but also making sure that our pet cats are on preventative flea medication in these areas. So here are the sources for the plague information, and here is a sign that if you frequent trails in the Tahoe area or the foothills regions, you may have come across one of these before. This one is from the Taylor Creek Visitors Center up near Lake Tahoe, and I've seen many others in that region warning you of the plague risk in those areas. Many of us have heard this one before, but honeybees do in fact die after they sting you, but this does not apply to all bees. Bumblebees, carpenter bees, queen honeybees, wasps, and hornets can sting multiple times because they have smooth needle-like stingers that can easily be withdrawn, where honeybees have barbed stingers that get stuck inside of our skin. So when a honeybee tries to remove its stinger and fly away after stinging you, it ends up tearing its body apart, as we can see in this photo here. So if a honeybee stinger is left in the skin after stinging, it's important that we quickly remove it because they can continue to release venom into the skin for 45 to 60 seconds after that initial sting. Next up, this one is a big letdown to some of us, but marigolds do not ward off garden pests. It is very common to see people planting these in and around their gardens. And while very pretty and a nice pop of color in our vegetable gardens, they unfortunately do not create the protective force field around our plants or gardens that we might wish, and they do not offer protection from pest insects. However, they can be less susceptible to feeding by rabbits and deer, and some varieties can control certain species of nematodes in the soil. So marigolds, like other flowers, can also help you attract beneficial insects and pollinators to your garden. So while they might not help keep the aphids out of your garden, they can offer other benefits as well. Here's some information if you want to learn more about what marigolds can actually do versus what they do not do. In the spring and summer, such as right now, you are commonly probably seeing these leggy flying insects bouncing around your buildings or resting on walls. And a lot of people call these mosquito eaters or mosquito hawks because they look like giant mosquitoes, but they are actually crane flies. So they do not actually eat mosquitoes as adults, nor larvae, unfortunately. And in fact, many species do not even have mouth parts to feed at all. Their larvae resemble caterpillars and they can be found in the soil, and they're actually a pest of lawns, and they can damage the roots and crowns and above ground portion of grass plants. While there are no organisms that are known to feed exclusively on mosquitoes, there are other animals that occasionally do feed on them. So bats and amphibians like frogs can feed on mosquitoes, but it's important to note that they do not make up a large part of their diet. Dragonflies also feed on mosquitoes, and mosquito fish are commonly used by mosquito and vector control agencies throughout California and other regions to manage mosquitoes in man-made water features like ponds and swimming pools. Mosquito fish can consume up to 3 times their body weight in mosquito larvae, and for an adult fish, this could be about 500 larvae per day. So if you're interested in using mosquito fish, get in contact with your local mosquito and vector control agency to see if they can give some to you. However, I want to stress that biological control alone or the use of natural predators such as frogs and dragonflies should not be solely relied on to control mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are simply too numerous to just rely on these animals, and these animals cannot control them enough to the point where public health can be to the point where they do not pose a risk to public health. So we must also take steps to prevent mosquitoes from breeding and reduce their populations. So this looks like dumping and removing sources of standing water, in addition to using repellents when we're outside to protect ourselves, and Bacillus thuringiensis, israelensis, if necessary. Here are some resources on the mosquitoes. So another unfortunate truth, figs have dead insects inside of them. I know several people who avoid eating figs because they are scared of eating these dead wasps. So if you didn't know, some figs are pollinated by tiny wasps. After pollinating the fruit, those tiny wasps will then get stuck inside of the fig and die in there. This is true for figs that are often grown in our backyards. Many of the commercially grown figs are grown without the need for pollinators, so it's less likely that you could potentially consume one of these tiny wasps if you buy store-bought figs. You're unlikely to notice or even be able to find or see or taste the tiny fig wasp pollinators inside of your fig, and that is because the figs produce a chemical that helps break down the body of the wasp. So by the time it gets to you on your plate, you shouldn't even have to worry about it. And second, if you're worried about accidentally consuming insects, I have some bad news for you on the following slides. Here are those fig sources. Yeah, so on this page here, the PBS video that is linked at the bottom there, that is a really great resource if you're interested in learning more about the whole pollination process of figs. It's a really well-detailed video. So as I said, if you're worried about a couple of fig wasps in your figs, you've got some bad news here, and that is that there are insects and rodent hairs in our food, and that Food and Drug Administration actually has to establish maximum levels of natural or unavoidable defects in our food that present no hazard to human health. So this includes whole insects, insect parts, eggs or immatures, and rodent hairs. So when the following levels are hit, an action must be taken to make the food safe or to remove it from production. So some pretty interesting maximum levels here are for raspberries and blackberries. There can be an average of 4 or more larvae or 10 whole insects per 500 grams of raspberries or blackberries. And in ground paprika, there would be a maximum average of 75 or more insect fragments or 11 or more rodent hairs per 25 grams of that. And for tomato puree, 20 or more fly eggs or 2 or more maggots per 100 grams. So if you're interested in learning more about these levels in a variety of food products, you can check out that source linked at the bottom of the slide there. You may never want to eat anything again. Next up, so landscape fabric and mulch do not permanently control weeds. While landscape fabrics and mulch can help us prevent weeds from establishing, they do not provide a long-term solution to weed problems. So there is not something that you can put down and never see a weed again. Unfortunately, weeds are really good at growing in places that you don't want them to go. So over time, fabrics and mulches are going to degrade, and the weed seeds can also build up on top of those, allowing them to potentially grow through it. And if they do grow through landscape fabric, it can be really tough to then remove those weeds because they get stuck in the fabric. In areas that you're repeatedly planting into, such as with annual plants, landscape fabric is not a good option because you're constantly creating new holes that weeds can then grow into after those annual plants are removed. So there is no silver bullet. There is no miracle solution for weed management. They are an inevitable part of our gardens and landscapes and lawns. And the best way to control them is to use a variety of management methods and to be persistent and consistent. Next up, repellents do not work for rodents. There are many, many products out there that claim to repel rodents, but there are no scientifically proven methods for repelling rodents, unfortunately. So while some of these repellents might work initially, the rodents will eventually become accustomed to them. They will get used to the scent. And if they want something bad enough, they will go to the lengths to go get it. A list of some things that do not work include soap, specifically Irish Spring soap, dryer sheets, and mothballs, which, side note, mothballs are meant to control moths and they can create noxious fumes, so they should be used very carefully and definitely not for rodents. Predator scent or urine and human scent also do not work. So you may have heard that touching rat traps before you put them out is a bad idea because the rats might smell your human scent and not want to go near them. That's not true. You should wear gloves when handling rat traps and anything related to rodents, though, because they can carry diseases, though. Another thing that does not work is castor bean oil or castor bean plants. And I will be showing the sources for this information in the following two slides. So in addition to that, ultrasonic repellent devices will not repel or scare away rodents. These devices often lose their intensity quickly with distance, so they cannot make it past objects or barriers or things like walls. So sound, magnetic, and vibration devices have not proven to be effective for controlling rodents like rats and mice. And gophers also do not, these devices do not also work for gophers because they don't frighten easily. So I'm sure we all wish that there was some great solution out there. But in general, these are the things that work, and these things should all be done in combination to keep those rodents out of our homes and structures. So save your money and focus on doing these things that actually work. So we want to modify our homes and landscapes to make them less suitable for rats and mice and other rodents. And this includes filling or covering entry points into buildings that are larger than 1/4 inch. Rats can get through gaps larger than 1/2 inch in diameter, and mice can enter through holes that are 1/4 inch. So remove these access points, and rodents are less likely to get inside of your home and cause trouble. You can also remove debris and harborage that provides excellent hiding places for them to hide in nests such as dense vegetation or ivy, wood piles, or boxes and debris on the ground. You also want to keep food stored in sturdy, sealed containers that they can't chew through. They can chew through hard plastic and other softer materials like wood. Trapping is a very effective, cheap, and non-chemical way that we can manage rodents. But again, remember that we must be doing all of these together because there is no silver bullet, one solution that works for managing them. So here are the resources for the repellents and rodent management information. Next up, insecticidal soaps are commonly used as a less toxic pesticide. However, there is some confusion that exists between insecticidal soaps and regular soaps or dish soaps. So insecticidal soaps are designed to be used outdoors on plants. They are registered with the EPA as an approved pesticide, and other household soaps are not. Dish soaps are often man-made detergents that are designed to be powerful chemical cleaners and degreasers. They are not meant to be used outside. They are often also not biodegradable, so they can end up harming the environment and our plants. If you use them on plants, they can also strip their coating, their waxy outer coating, causing them to dry out and burn, become very crispy, and in severe cases, they could kill the plant. Here is some information on insecticidal soaps. And now we will go through some interesting facts, things that maybe you thought were myths, but these are actually good news. True. So possums are resistant to snake venom from poisonous vipers such as the eastern and western diamondback rattlesnakes and copperheads. Researchers are even studying possums to understand how they could utilize this feature to treat humans that are bitten by snakes. And another fun fact is that opossums are native to the Americas, while possums, without the O, are native to Australia and the surrounding islands. So in this image here, this is a possum, I believe in Australia, that is attacking a snake that is trying to snatch up her baby. Cockroaches can be a source of indoor allergens and lead to the development of asthma in children. In fact, sensitization to cockroach allergens has been identified as one of the strongest risk factors in the development of asthma in low-income urban populations. So cockroaches, similar to flies, can be more than just a nuisance. They can actually be a public health risk. They contain a protein in their body parts that can be an allergen, and this is found in their body parts, in addition to dead cockroaches and their fecal matter. So when these tiny particles, tiny allergens become airborne, they can contaminate the air, and we can be exposed to them. If you're interested in learning more about cockroaches and asthma, it's actually very interesting. Next is another common misconception that invasive and non-native are not the same thing. So non-native species, these are organisms that do not occur naturally in an area. However, invasive species are organisms that also do not occur naturally in an area, but they also cause harm to the environment or our economy or other health indicators. So invasive species are non-native species, but it's that additional component of them causing harm that makes them invasive. So this is an important distinction that a lot of us miss or can often get tripped up on. So some examples of non-native species to North America that are not necessarily invasive can include tomatoes and many of our garden plants, earthworms, cows, honeybees, and red clover. Bedbugs can be seen with the naked eye, contrary to popular belief. While they're very small, they can be seen. The adults are a half an inch long and their eggs and immature are a little bit smaller, but still visible. You can find them on furniture, including mattresses, but also headboards and other upholstered things like chairs. Or you might notice dark spots as a result of their fecal specks. So bedbugs can also be found anywhere, even in the finest hotels. So it's important to always check for them when staying somewhere new. Nowhere is immune to bedbug infestations, even if it looks to be very clean. Another piece of good news is that bedbugs are not known to transmit any diseases to humans, but we obviously don't want to be sharing a room with them, and we obviously don't want them feeding on us. So we want to take measures to control them. If you've heard that snails and slugs can be trapped using beer or dough or yeast, then you have heard right. They are attracted to the yeast found in beer and bread dough, and placing yeasty sources in a shallow container outside can actually help attract them and trap them to avoid having them damage your garden plants. You want to use a container with deep sides so that they cannot escape. And these traps can be made at home using containers that you have lying around, or there are commercially available traps also that you can purchase. In a study done at Oregon State University, researchers trapped over 18,000 snails in just 2 days using a yeasty bread dough slurry that they made. So if you're interested in making these traps or learning how to make these traps, these are some great resources to go check out. Next up, the only medically significant spiders in California are native western black widows and the invasive brown widow spider. The brown recluse spider is not found in California, and no breeding populations have ever established in the state. There are many similar looking species throughout California, and it's very difficult to distinguish them without the consultation of a spider expert or an arachnologist. So one reason that we are greatly aware of recluse spiders throughout North America is because they cause necrotic, rotting flesh wounds. And these are commonly misdiagnosed as brown recluse spider bites. So although the recluses can cause these types of wounds, data suggests that the distribution of the spiders does not match up with where these diagnoses are made. So people may claim to have a brown recluse spider bite in a place that is not known to have any brown recluse spider populations, and that is very common. So it's important to note that medical professionals are not trained arachnologists, and we cannot link a bite or a skin reaction to a specific spider or pest. And here are some sources on that if you'd like to learn more. And lastly, moles have eyes and they are not rodents. So this is another common misconception. While you cannot see their tiny little eyes, they do in fact have them. They're very small and poorly developed, and they're often covered with skin or fur. But they actually have very powerful eyes that can detect light versus dark. They are virtually blind. I meant to say they have very powerful senses of smell, though, that helps them get through. So they rely on that great sense of smell instead of their vision. And they are not rodents like gophers and voles. They are instead insectivores because they feed primarily on insects. Some information on moles. And lastly, I'd like to share a couple take-home messages from this presentation. So first of all, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I know we all wish there was a miracle cure-all solution for our pest problems, but that is usually very unlikely, and a lot of the things that we hear and see online are unfounded and can sometimes be marketing tactics that companies get us to try to fall for because we are so eager to have this, one-size-fits-all cure-all solution. Secondly, to no one's surprise, not everything you see on the internet is true or fact, and so we should be very mindful of attributing any personal anecdotes or facts as facts, And remember that sometimes the truth can get twisted. So we should make sure to do our due diligence and do some research online, relying on science-based or university-based resources to get actual factual information. So thank you for listening in. I hope you learned something new. Myths and memes certainly do rule the world. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing those interesting pest myths and facts. Appreciate your time today.